this is the OpenFaaS Community Roundtable call. There's other kinds of calls that we are having, and I'm going to mention them briefly. On the invite, I said to people to wear your FaaS Friday t-shirt, bring your stickers or swag, so you get a chance to show that off later. As you see, I've forgotten mine, but I have this. So the Zoom meetings. So far, we started doing these about every 2 weeks and had one call for everything. It turned out that we probably needed either to double the time of the call to 2 hours or to have a few different kinds of calls. So now the call we're having where everyone's invited is the office hours, chance for question and answer, and just some updates from the project direction, things like that. Get a chance to introduce yourself. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you don't have to, but it would be great to hear from you. And then there's the members call, which started up recently. So within the GitHub organization, we now have about 15 members. Members are people who are the member of a GitHub organization, basically. It's quite straightforward. They're members because it means we can assign each other work, we can track it through GitHub, and generally people that have just shown a commitment or an interest in contributing that we've got to know over some time and that are becoming important for the project. The core contributors are people that have a bit of a wider vision across the project that help with direction and also with decisions on what to be doing next and share a bit more responsibility. Now, are you familiar with the core contributors? If you want to see the members, they're on the GitHub org. So today we're going to get a few updates from the project, and then we'll go around and get a chance to chat. So some of you have seen this slide, and I just brought it back today because really there's 3 parts of the update. I want to talk to you about how the community is growing and changing, just like the GitHub members, the industry backing that is growing, and also the users that we've got. And this all ties back or can be tied back to different key values of the project about being focused on developers first, being easy for operators, not a headache, and that community aspect that you're used to seeing. So this is a basic point of the project. OpenFaaS gives you serverless on your terms. It's focusing on being easy to use. You know, we have that UI, we've got the command line interface. John McCabe helped us out recently with the up command. I don't know if you've seen that yet. I did a blog post, 5 things you can do with the FaaS CLI to work more productively. Again, that's going back to just making this easier to use. We're still digging into that. You can run any code. There's a new blog post showing how to run a stateless microservice. Some of you may have seen Google launched a new project called Knative, and they don't just run functions, but they'll run microservices as well, as long as they don't have any state. OpenFaaS has always been able to do that. What we've done is just made the support even better and released that. So if you check out the latest blog, you'll see exactly how to use that. And it references a challenge that GitLab's CEO gave, which was, I'd love to be able to run a Ruby on Rails app in OpenFaaS, have it scale to 0 when it's idle, have everything work exactly the same without making any changes to it. And I think that's one of the things that we can do now. Obviously, this will run anywhere. Radoslav, who's on the call, speaking to the community here, he's been helping me up the support for 32-bit ARM. And so if you've got a Raspberry Pi cluster like the one I have behind me, all of the latest Docker images are being published now on a regular basis, and you can get all the advantages from the project using that. And then any scale has kind of got a new meaning now because we got scale to 0 support built into the project. And I think there's a pull request that Bart is working on right now, so that as soon as you deploy through Helm, you can actually decide whether you want the scale to 0 on or not. So really, when you look at OpenFaaS and you compare that to some of the other projects that are out there, it's about you deciding the limits, you working out what you want, rather than working against the limitations that you're finding in the system. Now this is generated by a function that Ken wrote. It's 12 o'clock in Japan, so he couldn't join us. But he's basically in the middle on the left, and he built this as a function, and I just ran it in a browser on OpenFaaS Cloud, generated this today. We're now at 131 contributors across the whole of the organization, which I think is fantastic. And many of those aren't just people that have added a blog, you know, they're repeat offenders, if you like, repeat committers, and they're coming back and helping to build the project. So OpenFaaS is built by you guys, for you to use, and I think that's one of the things that really separates our community at the moment. This is the blog post that I just mentioned. In the example, you can find out how to deploy a regular guest book written in Ruby with Sinatra, and it uses Postgres or MySQL on the back end. That gives you the ability to just deploy that as if it was a function. It gets fully managed in exactly the same way. I'd encourage you to go and have a look at it. Now, this is the list of end users that have that aren't just using it, but have come forward and said that they're using it. There's a thread on GitHub, and each of these companies has come forward and saying, we're solving a real problem with this. Wireline was added yesterday. There's another company that's doing credit card processing that we're adding today. And so this just keeps growing, and I think that should be something that reassures us that we're doing the right thing, that people are able to find value and solve problems with what we've got right now, despite this being something that's evolving and that still has some of the vision to lock down. So one of the things I asked the core contributors was, you know, what is OpenFaaS Cloud to you? And some of you guys, you may not really know what it's there for. And when it originally launched this, the idea was it would give you GitOps for your functions, such that you have your developer workspace on the left, you commit your code into GitHub, and then Magic Pipeline will come along and package up your function and give you a URL for it. So a bit similar to the Heroku model. But I think as we've had more of the full-time team working on OpenFaaS Cloud and more of the community building into it, I think it's morphed and become more of the multi-user way to run OpenFaaS. I'm going to go on to say a few of the things that we're doing to make that even better as a use case. So OpenFaaS Cloud is becoming a platform for you to run OpenFaaS for multiple users or for a team. And it's not just locked into GitHub. Martin Dekoff over in Sofia, he's been adding support for GitLab and finding all of the differences between the GitHub and GitLab payloads and authorization models, so that you could, for instance, Patricio at Vision Banco in Paraguay could take OpenFaaS Cloud, deploy it within their private data center, and have their statement generator function built and deployed through this. That makes sense. So it's morphing, it's changing. Have a look at the roadmap in the Git repo. One of the other things that you'll see is support for private repos in GitHub that's been merged recently too. So in terms of the roadmap, we're now up at OpenFaaS 0.92, which is where we added additional support for microservices. Stefan has been doing a lot of work around Istio, and he's going to show us just a very quick 5-minute overview of this. Istio is a service mesh tool. It can enhance security. I think we're looking at it as an optional component, but there's certainly things that it can do that would be really useful within a function's deployment, including tracing and what's called mutual TLS, which is upping the security between your functions. Within OpenFaaS Cloud, the roadmap is now pointing towards making the multi-user support better by adding an Oauth 2 login. So if you're using GitLab, you should log in to see your functions. If you're using GitHub, you should log in again. The dashboard's being rewritten in React by Ken, Once that's complete, I think it will be easier for people to contribute to. And then the work around GitLab is a moving piece at the moment, but it would be great to have to find some people to try that out and install that on their instances. Okay. And then in terms of events, the next event coming up for us is Open Source Summit. And I know John, Stefan, potentially Bart and Ivana, myself, we're all looking to be there. And there's a talk that's been accepted about OpenFaaS Cloud on the Monday. So it would be great to see any of you there that can make it. All right. What we'll do now is we'll get a quick demo from Stefan. I'll stop sharing, and then we'll go around. And if you guys have had any questions about the update, we'll get a chance to talk. All right. So Stefan.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so this week I've been trying to run OpenFaaS inside Istio. Of course, nothing works by default, but with small changes, I managed to run it. So what I'll be showing you is OpenFaaS running on Istio, running on GKE, but it's not. It should work on any other cloud that has upstream Kubernetes support. I will use WeaveCloud to give you an overview of how the system is composed. So when you install Istio, first of all, I'm installing Istio with all the tracing and security features turned on. So I'm having Istio with Jaeger, with Prometheus, with MTLS set up. And this is how the Istio namespace looks like. We have here two components. One is Istio ingress gateway, and one is the egress gateway. What this ingress gateway does is it replaces, let's say, Nginx ingress gateway or your cloud vendor gateway. When you install it, the Istio ingress gateway gets a public IP through a Kubernetes load balancer. So what I did, I got that IP and I made a DNS record for it. And because Istio comes with Cert Manager as well, I've provisioned a Let's Encrypt certificate for my Istio ingress gateway. So I have, from the internet, when you reach the ingress gateway, here is Let's Encrypt certificate. From here, from the Istio gateway, everything inside the cluster is also using TLS. And it's called neutral TLS. Istio takes care of that. Every time you create a deployment that has a service inside your cluster, a sidecar will get attached inside each pod, and service-to-service communication will be secure with TLS. What that means for OpenFaaS, let's say you are running OpenFaaS Cloud and you are hosting untrusted workloads. Let's say you don't trust the functions that your users will be running there, or maybe you are afraid that some function has some kind of, I don't know, vulnerability inside. With MTLS, you make sure that from one service, you cannot just, I don't know, see all the traffic inside your cluster, because service-to-service communication is encrypted. So this is a big feature of Istio, MTLS. And another big feature is the fact that since Istio runs all these sidecars everywhere, it can create an open tracing profile of your services without having you to instrument, let's say, your OpenFaaS function or the gateway or whatever microservices you are running there. You get these features by default. So I've installed Istio with all these components, and afterwards I've installed OpenFaaS in the two namespaces, OpenFaaS and OpenFaaS September. So here is the OpenFaaS gateway. As you can see from the internet, you hit the Istio ingress, and the Istio ingress will go to the gateway, and the gateway, of course, talks to the Prometheus instance inside OpenFaaS and to other functions that you have. So here is my OpenFaaS portal. Here is HTTPS. I've deployed all these functions through the OpenFaaS store. And now I will make a call to node info. So okay, click the button a couple of times. It makes calls to the function. And now let's say I want to track all these things from the internet, Istio gateway, and our function, and see how that call is being made. This is how the Jaeger UI looks like. It's an open tracing implementation. Jaeger is part of it's a CNCF project. It's open source. So for example, here I'm seeing I can filter based on all my services inside OpenFaaS. Inside my cluster, I'm selecting node info, and I want to see how node info gets called. And here is one of the calls that I made. And you can see here nicely that my request came from the ingress gateway. It hit the HTTPS endpoint, the public endpoint. From there, this is the Istio gateway, and from there, the Istio gateway will forward the call to the OpenFaaS gateway. The OpenFaaS gateway receives the request and creates a new, uses an HTTP client inside to call node info. So here, the request got in. It's a span kind server, and here, also inside the gateway is a span kind client because this is the client call, and goes to HTTPS node info OpenFaaS FN. So here is TLS and everything down. The gateway makes another TLS call to node info. If I'm looking inside the function, here the watchdog receives the request from the gateway, calls the Node.js function inside, and returns the request way up to the outside. Also here, you can see that every time a call is being made, the sidecar, that's Envoy, calls the Istio policy, the Istio mixer, that decides if a call is authorized or not. What I'm having here, besides the fact that I've installed Istio, I've also set up some policies. For example, if, let's say, I would exec into the node info pod, I could not call any kind of open source, OpenFaaS core services. Like, let's say, you cannot call the gateway to delete a function, you cannot call Prometheus to alter the data, and so on. The functions can be called only by the gateway, and they can do external calls, but not inside calls. And this is how you can protect yourself from, I don't know, rogue functions. So this is the tracing feature. It's very useful for debugging and stuff like that. You can see where the latency is. So for this request took like 150 milliseconds, and most of it, most of that time it's spent inside the function call in a Node.js app. And you can clearly see here that the duration is 1.5 millisecond, start time 12 milliseconds. So you can see each microservice, how the call goes in each microservice, can see how much it took each step. Another thing that Istio does is with his with the Prometheus monitoring. Let's say I want to look at the OpenFaaS gateway, and I can see the success rate, the request duration, things that we already have right now in our own Prometheus monitoring. But what Istio does is inbound monitoring and outbound monitoring. So for example, I can see what goes into my gateway and from whom. For example, here I'm seeing that there is this traffic is received from the Istio ingress gateway. It's over MTLS, and all the response code was 200. And in the outbound, I can see what the function, what the gateway is calling, right? For example, it's calling Prometheus because it has to get all the data. It's connected to NATS, and also the Kubernetes API because I'm running the the OpenFaaS CRD controller, the operator. So because both sits in the same pod, I can see all the outside traffic and inside traffic, and I create others based on that and so much more. I've started documenting all of this, all these steps that needs to be done for running OpenFaaS in Istio. I've also made some pull requests. There is a pull request for the Helm chart. It needs a lot of changes, like, for example, the health checks. You cannot let kubelet do the health checks anymore. You need to do an exec inside the pod to run the health checks. You need some standardization on how you expose Kubernetes cluster IP services. All the service IP must have HTTP or HTTPS as the name of the port. So for example, this is how I changed the gateway service. I added name HTTP. So Istio will look at this and will say, okay, if this service exposes an HTTP endpoint, I can do a tracing on it. I can do L7 routing and stuff like that.
Yeah, Stefan, I think we probably need to start wrapping it up now, and the level of detail has probably gone a bit too deep for this call. But what are the things you're most excited about with adding the support to have Istio in OpenFaaS as an option?
So one thing I really like the fact that you can do this kind of tracing. When I write a function and stuff like that, and I do a load test, I have no idea where is the actual delay. Is it in my function code? Is something inside the gateway and stuff like that? So when I'm modifying, let's say, the gateway, I want to do some testing on it, and having tracing over that really helps. Another thing that I really like is the MTLS part that assures me that nobody can, I can run other people functions in there, which is pretty cool. Yeah. The open tracing and MTLS are probably the biggest features I'm interested in, but also the Prometheus monitoring looks really nice.
Is this the latest and greatest Istio?
Yeah, okay. I'm running
cool
1.02 release.
Has anyone got any questions for Stefan before we go around and just have some question and answer time? Okay.
Look, if you have a chain of functions, how will the tracing look? Is it possible?
How do you chain functions right now? A function calls the gateway, right? From the external endpoint of the gateway, right? So when you call the gateway function, if you send the request ID header, tracing should work. Just a matter of forwarding the HTTP header to that call. I could do a demo of that. It's pretty easy.
We should
try that. Read the header from inside the function and attach that header to a HTTP call, and you can have tracing with chaining functions, of course.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, I think once we get to 0.93, we'll have everything released, and maybe this even in the Helm chart, so that you can just install it with a single additional flag once you have Istio in place. You can try it out, let us know. We're not quite there yet, but I'm sure Stefan would appreciate anyone who wants to help him out with testing this.